My parents combined my graduation with my sister's promotion party and made me pay both, but I had my real graduation far away from their stage. Hi, my name is Olivia Carter. I am 27 years old, and I have just officially completed my MBA at Wharton Business School in Philadelphia, a milestone I sacrificed nearly everything to achieve. For many, this would be an unforgettable source of pride, a moment when family gathers around, raises glasses, and captures radiant photos filled with laughter. But for me, from the day I was born until now, not a single moment has ever truly belonged to me. There has never been the cheer of family on important days, never a word of congratulations from my parents when I reached an accomplishment, and never a warm embrace to ease the exhaustion after a long journey. I grew up in the silence of neglect, always in the shadow of my younger sister, who was endlessly cherished and praised. That is why this time, I decided to create a memory of my own. I quietly reached out to an upscale restaurant in the city center and reserved a small but elegant dinner. I carefully chose the menu, ordered flowers, and sent invitations to friends, colleagues, and a few professors who had guided me through the hardest years. Most importantly, I also sent invitations to my parents and my sister. I knew well that they might not care, but deep down, I still hoped that just once they would show up, sit at the table, smile, and acknowledge my effort. For so many years, I convinced myself that if I just tried a little harder, endured a little longer, perhaps the love and recognition I longed for would finally come. The closer the day came, the more my heart raced. I imagined myself walking into the restaurant, hearing the applause of friends, the sound of glasses clinking, and in the corner, seeing my parents nodding proudly. In that moment, I believed that the old wounds would ease, if only slightly. Yet a single phone call shattered it all. One day before the dinner, I received a call from the restaurant manager. His voice was polite but firm. "Just to confirm, this is a combined event celebrating your MBA graduation and your sister Emily's promotion, correct?" I froze, my heart pounding as if someone had just drained all the air from my lungs. I had never heard of any so-called combination. This dinner was supposed to be mine. I was the one who contacted the restaurant, signed the contract, and paid for everything. Struggling to keep my voice steady, I asked, "What did you just say?" I never agreed to combine anything. The manager hesitated before replying. "Your family reached out. They confirmed they wanted to turn the dinner into a joint event, celebrating both your graduation and your sister Emily's promotion. We assumed you already knew, so I just called for final confirmation." I went silent, completely numb. That all too familiar feeling washed over me again, the feeling of being pushed aside, erased from my own story. My throat tightened with a mix of anger and helplessness. Once more, even on the very day that was supposed to honor me, the name Olivia Carter was nothing more than a backdrop for Emily to shine. I stood frozen, gripping my phone until my knuckles turned white, with one question echoing over and over in my mind. Why am I never allowed a single moment that belongs only to me? My hands trembled as I set the phone down on the table after the manager's call. Only one thought consumed me. I had to call my parents immediately. I dialed the familiar number, a string of digits tied to both my childhood and the countless times I had called home while away at college. The line rang, each tone cutting deeper into me, because I was caught between hoping this was some kind of mistake and dreading the confirmation that I had been erased once again. After the third ring, my mother answered. Her voice came through calm and unsurprised. "Hello, Olivia, what's wrong?" I drew in a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Mom, the restaurant just called me. They said my graduation dinner has been combined with Emily's promotion party. Do you know anything about this?" On the other end of the line, I heard the clatter of dishes, then my mother's voice, light and casual as if she were talking about grocery shopping. "Oh yes, that's right. I thought it would be more convenient to do it together. Your sister just got promoted, which is worth celebrating too, and she has so many guests. Combining the two saves trouble and saves money. You don't mind, do you?" I went numb. For a moment, I could not find words to respond. My mother saw merging this dinner the greatest milestone of my academic life merely as a matter of convenience, like buying in bulk to cut costs. Swallowing hard, I managed to force out words. Mom, but this is the ceremony I've been waiting for all these years. I just wanted one day for myself, just once. Before I could even finish, my father's voice cut in, curt and dismissive. You should be grateful. A fancy restaurant like that isn't easy to book. You may study hard and be good with books, but you've never been good at making people like you. Let Emily bring some life to the room, draw in more guests. What's the harm? Just think of it as thanks to her that your party will feel lively. His words struck directly at my dignity. Instead of recognizing my academic achievements and relentless effort, my father reduced me to someone bland, someone who needed my sister's social charm to keep my own celebration from being dull. I gripped the phone tightly, forcing myself to swallow the tears already welling at the corners of my eyes. And then, as if to extinguish the last spark of hope, Emily's voice chimed in, sharp and confident. Come on, sis, don't make this dramatic. You've studied hard, you've got your MBA, I know, everyone knows, but you don't know how to make a party fun. If guests come and all they hear is you talking about books and work, they'll be bored to death. With me there, it'll be different. I know how to make people feel comfortable, make the night lively. You should be thanking me. Otherwise, your guests might just leave early. Her words landed like a slap across my face. In her eyes, my degree was nothing more than a lifeless piece of paper, while being lively was what truly earned recognition. I sat in silence, my heart unbearably heavy. Memories rushed back of all the other times it had been exactly like this. Every time I achieved something, my family found a way to attach it to Emily or reduce it into something secondary. And now, even the day I had longed for most had been taken from me. The voices of my parents and sister echoed in my mind, cold and indifferent, as if I were nothing more than a backdrop to let Emily shine. I pressed my lips together and whispered softly, I understand. I hung up the phone, my hand still trembling, but this time it wasn't only from pain. It was from the surge of a new resolve rising inside me. In that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do if I no longer wanted to disappear from the story of my own life. I set the phone down and leaned against the kitchen counter, feeling as though I had just stepped back from the edge of a cliff. Without even trying, I could hear the voices from the call fracturing into layers of old memories. They didn't come alone, they arrived linked together like beads on a string, each one striking the next, rolling forward into the hollow sound of a lifetime spent fading into the background. I saw again my 7th birthday cake, the frosting smeared where Olivia had been hastily erased to make room for, "Congratulations, Emily, on your first piano recital." My mother had said it was more convenient, that the guests could come once and not have to bother with 2 parties. I remembered Christmas in 8th grade, the tree buried under boxes wrapped with shiny ribbons for Emily red dresses, glittery shoes, an instant camera while I received a pair of warm socks and a notebook. You like writing, don't you? And New Year's in 10th grade, when my father praised Emily for being charming, someone everyone loves to talk to, proudly announcing she would lead the school's performance group at the state competition. While I, the one who had just won first place in the essay contest, was quietly told, "Don't brag about it, or people will dislike you." On my high school graduation day, the family portrait that had once hung in the living room was replaced with a picture of Emily on the cheerleading stage. My photo in the cap and gown, holding my diploma, was clipped to the corner of the large frame, shoved into its shadow. At Thanksgiving dinners, my seat was always at the far end of the table near the kitchen. "Sit there, it's easier for you to get up and help me bring the dishes," my mother would say. I grew accustomed to the heat of the oven blowing against the back of my neck, and to quietly reminding Emily not to spill soy sauce on the tablecloth, only to hear my mother laugh afterward, her hands shake sometimes. "But you're more careful. That's good." In every script my family wrote, I was the one who kept everything running smoothly, and because of that, I slowly became treated like part of the machinery rather than a person with a joy of my own. After graduating from college, I didn't linger with dreams of summer trips to the beach or long road trips with friends. I went straight to work, starting with an entry-level consulting job that paid just enough to get by, with a little left over if I managed carefully. I learned to cut corners on everything. I rented a tiny room with a window facing nothing but the brick wall of the building next door. I walked an extra 15 minutes instead of buying a transit pass. I bought cheap ground coffee and brewed it in a thermos I carried with me. My work shirts came from end-of-season clearance racks. I set up a neat Excel spreadsheet for the family. Emily's tuition each semester, her books, her dorm fees, my parents' credit card debts, the interest rates and due dates. The utility bills when my father was out of work for a few months, the cost of repairing the roof after a storm leaked into the living room. The time my father's car broke down on the highway and had to be towed. Even the small but relentless medical bills after my mother sprained her ankle at the supermarket. Each line on that spreadsheet was a story, and I paid them off as steadily as breathing. Once, when Emily missed a tuition deadline because she had spent her money on an expensive gown for her department's formal, I immediately wired over a large sum, adding a message that said, "Next time, let me know earlier." She replied with a quick thank you emoji and a mirror selfie of her in the dress, captioned, "Best sister ever." That same year, I put aside my plans to apply for graduate school, telling myself, just one more year, let Emily finish without worries. I picked up side projects, spending weekends at the public library with a lunchbox of food I had cooked myself, because part of that paycheck would inevitably go into the family column. I convinced myself it was as natural as a heartbeat. The eldest takes care, shoulders the weight, carries what others cannot. And if I carried it well enough, maybe the family would finally see me. When I received my first paycheck with a small bonus, I placed a delicate silver bracelet in my online cart, then removed it after a text from Mom read, "This month's credit card is tight, can you cover it?" I wrote back, "Yes." Closed my laptop, and felt the craving for something small, just for me, vanish like the froth of coffee dissolving into water. On one of the rare occasions, I was promoted to project team leader after a string of quarters spent working myself to exhaustion. I thought it might finally be the anchor point, the moment that would make them see where I had reached. I reserved a table at a charming Italian restaurant and called the family. "I have good news I want to share." That evening, I arrived early, asking the waiter to place a small candle on a piece of tiramisu. In my mind, I imagined my mother touching my hand and saying, "We're proud of you," my father patting my shoulder with, "Well done, Emily," teasing, "Our trailblazer sister," and all of us laughing together. But when they arrived, the conversation instantly veered onto a familiar track. My mother spoke excitedly about Emily's new boyfriend. "His family runs a big business, he's polite, stylish." My father chuckled and asked me, "Anyone at your company drive cars as nice as his?" Then turned back to Emily with a half-serious warning. "Make sure you hold on to him. Men like that don't come around often." I sat there, smiling faintly, forcing down the feeling that the chairs and table were drifting away, as if I were floating out of my own dinner. When the waiter brought out the tiramisu with its tiny candle glowing, I cleared my throat, ready to say a few words of thanks to my team, but Emily suddenly squealed, "Oh, that reminds me, this weekend my boyfriend's taking me to test drive a car. Should I go with the pearl white model, Mom?" The conversation erupted at once into talk of financing options and interior color schemes. The candle on the tiramisu burned down to nothing, and I snuffed it out myself. By the end of the meal, my father stood and raised his glass to toast Emily's bright future. My mother added, "My daughter is a real gem." And the only words left for me were a flat, almost obligatory, "Being a team leader is good too." As we were leaving, my mother picked up a ribbon from the bouquet that had decorated the table and tied it around Emily's wrist. "It suits you, keep it as a keepsake," she said. I looked down at my own hands empty and tucked them into my coat pockets as if afraid someone might notice they were trembling. These wounds did not split open tonight. They were fine lines stretching across the years, sometimes faint, sometimes bold, always hiding just in time beneath the fabric of, "For the family." I had trained myself to justify every time I was erased with a single phrase, "A child's duty." I told myself that sacrifice was a language of love, that people could be clumsy in showing affection, that if I held on just a little longer, if I studied the fragile balance of our family a little more, then surely one day they would turn back, call my name, rest a warm hand on my back. I wrote out, erased, and rewrote these equations again and again, trying to convince myself so that the silence would not become deafening. Until this afternoon, when the restaurant manager's call rang like a fire alarm. More convenient to combine, less hassle. Emily draws the guests. Each word was another brick added to the wall separating me from the last private joy I had tried to keep for myself. I realized that perhaps I had never even been allowed to pronounce the word mine in my family's dictionary. Everything was shared, but the sharing always tilted to one side. And as I put the phone down, standing in the small kitchen with the Philadelphia sunset sliding across the window pane, I felt something very simple that I had long tried to forget. If I didn't draw the line, no one would do it for me. I had endured so long that the boundaries had blurred into invisibility. It was time to drag them back into sharp relief. And for the first time, in a calmness laced with a steel edge I barely recognized as my own, I understood that kindness no longer meant allowing others to cut my moment in half and stitch it into a banner for themselves. In the deepest corners of memory where the birthday cake bore only half my name, where the candle on the tiramisu died out without a word, a small seed of intent broke through, silent but resolute. I would not let tomorrow repeat any of the old patterns again. I sat in silence for a long while in that tiny kitchen, hearing nothing but the slow ticks of the clock on the wall. Inside my head, voices tangled together: the harshness of my father, the indifference of my mother, the sweet mockery of Emily. I had lived with those sounds for years, but never had they rung so painfully loud. In front of me, I saw again the image of the candle on the tiramisu snuffed out, mixing with memories of Christmas gifts I never got to choose, and now an entire graduation celebration turned into a backdrop for someone else. A hidden tide rose inside me, but instead of crashing, it stilled into a surface so calm it was almost frightening. And in that stillness, I understood exactly what I had to do. That very night, I opened my laptop and logged into the account where I had reserved the upscale restaurant. My cursor hovered over the line that read, Carter Family Event Confirmation, and my heart pounded as if I were about to commit a crime. I clicked, cancel, typed a brief reason. No longer fits requirements. The system prompted me again, are you sure? I drew in a long breath, and for the first time, my hand did not shake. I clicked, confirm. In that moment, it felt as though an invisible rope that had long been tightening around my chest finally snapped. No more restaurant with white tablecloths and glittering chandeliers, no more forced laughter as Emily took the center of the room. There was only me, alone, and a silence that felt like freedom. The next day, I still called home, my voice soft and obedient, just as it had always been. I nodded at my mother's instruction. Remember to wear something elegant. Don't embarrass the family. I murmured agreement when my father insisted, don't talk too much. Let Emily take the lead. I even sent Emily a smiling emoji when she bragged about choosing her dazzling evening gown. On the outside, I let them believe I was still the old Olivia, compliant, well-behaved, willing to fade into the background. But deep within, another Olivia had quietly opened her eyes, and this time, I would not step back. That afternoon, I found myself at a small restaurant along the Delaware River, just a few blocks from Wharton. I had been there once after a study session, and though it wasn't luxurious, it radiated warmth. The place had wide glass windows looking out over the water shimmering in the sunset, a low wooden ceiling strung with soft yellow lights, and round wooden tables set close enough to encourage conversation. I asked the owners, a middle-aged Italian couple, if they accepted private reservations for around 40 guests. The wife smiled kindly and said, "Of course, we can help you. We'll make it truly special." In that moment, I felt something loosen inside me, as if I had finally found a harbor after a long, exhausting voyage. I didn't choose roses or expensive orchids. I chose simple bunches of yellow daisies, the kind I used to buy at the corner market near my dorm during my freshman year, when I counted every single coin. They weren't glamorous, but they were bright, alive, a reminder that beauty can spring from the most ordinary things. I added a few simple desserts: tiramisu, cheesecake, some almond cookies. I knew my friends didn't need grandeur. What they wanted was an atmosphere that felt honest and real. I opened my contacts and began composing invitations one by one. Tomorrow evening, I'm hosting a small gathering by the Delaware River. It's not a big party, just a private moment. I'd love for you to come, because you've been part of my journey. I sent it to my classmates, the ones who had stayed up all night with me working on financial analyses. I sent it to my colleagues, the ones who had seen me exhausted but still working late into the night to finish projects. I sent it to my advisor, who once told me in a meeting, "Olivia, you are not only intelligent, you are steadfast. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." And this time, I skipped over my family's email addresses. No more formal invitations, no more false hopes. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and realized I had just made one of the hardest yet most liberating decisions of my life. I had grown so used to living for others that even the smallest action for myself felt strange and unsettling. But as my eyes fell on the notebook lying open on the table, its pages filled with notes of all the money I had sacrificed for my family, I suddenly felt it was all worth it. For the first time, I had chosen to place my own name on the very first page of the story. The night before the party, I walked along the banks of the Delaware River. The wind carried the damp scent of water, and the gentle sound of waves lapping against the rocks reached my ears. I wondered how tomorrow would unfold, how many people would come, whether they would think my gathering too small compared to lavish banquets. But then I remembered the eyes of friends who had stood with me through endless exams, the voice of my professor telling me I was steadfast, the laughter of my colleagues when our project finally succeeded. I knew those people wouldn't come for chandeliers or grand tables, they would come because they truly valued me. I sat down on a wooden bench by the river, opened my phone, and saw a reminder from my mother. "Remember to arrive early tomorrow to help Emily greet the guests." I smiled, for the first time without bitterness, because they knew nothing of my real plan. I switched off the screen, tucked the phone into my pocket, and looked up at the night sky, black and heavy with just a few stars scattered across it. Quietly, I whispered to myself, "This time, Olivia, you will do it for you." And in that moment, I felt a strange peace, as though for the very first time I was truly alive, not as a shadow, but as myself. The morning of the party, I woke with a feeling both nervous and unfamiliar, unlike any other day before. Usually, on important occasions, I was so tense my heart would race, always afraid something would go wrong, that my parents' eyes or my sister's teasing words would rob me of any joy. But this morning, as the soft summer sunlight filtered through the window, I felt a calm I had never known. Perhaps it was because I knew that everything about this day would unfold by my choice alone. No one would interrupt. No convenience would ever again overshadow my moment. I arrived at the little restaurant by the Delaware River early, well before the set time. The owners had nearly finished preparing. On the simple round wooden tables, vases of yellow daisies had been carefully arranged, each petal glowing in the sunlight streaming through the glass windows. The space was not lavish, not elaborate, but I could feel warmth radiating all around. From the low wooden ceiling hung a few soft golden lights, their glow reflecting across the tables and bathing the entire room in the shade of sweet honey. A few trays of desserts were already set out: tiramisu, cheesecake, almond cookies beside steaming pots of fragrant tea and coffee. I stood still for a moment, drawing a deep breath of that sweet aroma, and felt my heart settle. Guests began to arrive, one by one. My classmates were the first to walk in, carrying laughter with them. "Olivia, finally, the day has come." They hugged me, tightly, genuinely, with no pretense or formality. Then my colleagues arrived, familiar faces who had stood shoulder to shoulder with me through countless late-night projects. One of them, Mark, stepped in with a grin. If it weren't for Olivia, our team would have been fired last year. Today, we came to say that out loud. Laughter filled the room, and the atmosphere seemed to glow brighter. When my advisor from Wharton walked in, I almost couldn't believe it. He was a busy man, rarely attending students' private gatherings, and yet here he was. He shook my hand, his gaze serious yet warm. "Olivia, you've done very well. I'm proud of you." My throat tightened, my eyes burned hot. Those words of praise were not interrupted, not compared, not turned into a backdrop for anyone else's story. They belonged to me, and me alone. The clinking of glasses echoed softly as people began sharing memories of me, one after another. A colleague recalled the night I stayed at the office until 3 in the morning to finish a crucial report for the whole team when everyone else had wanted to give up. A friend recounted how I quietly shared textbooks and notes with the entire class when the professor gave us a surprise assignment. Another spoke with emotion about how my patience had kept her from dropping out of school halfway. These stories, these words of recognition, were things I had never once heard from my own family. They felt like puzzle pieces fitting together to reveal a picture I had never dared to face, that I truly mattered, that I had left a mark on the lives of others. Amid the laughter and toasts, I couldn't hold back my tears. They fell warm against my cheeks, not from pain like all the times before, but from happiness. For the first time in my life, I was at a celebration where every word, every glance, was directed at me, Olivia Carter, and not at the name Emily. No one cut me off, no one mentioned someone else's accomplishments to overshadow mine. For the first time, I was whole. I stood, holding a glass of white wine in my hand. The golden light reflected against the glass, shimmering through the tears still clinging to my face. I looked around the room at the smiling faces, people who had chosen to be there for me. I drew in a deep breath, and with a voice trembling but firm, I said, "Thank you, all of you. You may not know it, but today means more to me than anything else. This is my real graduation." A round of applause erupted, lively and warm. I felt my hands trembling, but not from fear this time. It was because, for the first time, I had spoken aloud what I wanted, without asking for permission, without hiding. I set my glass down, smiled through the tears, and knew from this moment on, I would never again allow myself to be erased. While I was surrounded by laughter, kind eyes, and heartfelt embraces at the little restaurant by the Delaware River, an entirely different scene was unfolding in another corner of Philadelphia. The luxurious venue where my family had imagined their combined party had been prepared that evening only for ordinary diners, with no trace of the grand event my parents and Emily had envisioned. My father's gleaming SUV pulled up to the front entrance. My mother stepped out, perfectly composed in the deep blue dress she had so carefully chosen, her eyes shining with the confidence of someone about to preside over a radiant celebration. Emily walked beside her, hair curled into soft waves, the metallic shimmer of her gown catching every glance. Behind them trailed several guests, my parents' colleagues, and, most importantly, Emily's new work friends, the very people she was so eager to impress. All of them believed they were about to step into a glittering hall filled with pristine white tablecloths, fine wine, and elaborate flower arrangements. But when the restaurant doors opened, the sight before them left them frozen. Inside, the tables were set as usual for regular diners, with no long banquet tables draped in white, no fresh flowers, no welcoming sign. The staff moved briskly about, handing menus to couples and small families, with not a single waiter standing by to host any Carter, Emily, Olivia event, as they had expected. My mother froze at the threshold, her eyes darting anxiously around the room. My father's brow furrowed, his face flushing red as he assumed there must have been some mistake in the preparations. He strode quickly to the reception desk, his voice booming with fury. "We reserved a banquet for more than 50 guests, the Carter family. Why is there not a single table prepared?" The receptionist faltered, then hurriedly called for the manager. The very manager I had spoken with the day before appeared, composed and courteous in every gesture. He bowed slightly, his voice calm and steady. "I'm sorry, sir, but that event was cancelled yesterday by the person who made the reservation directly, Miss Olivia Carter." The air seemed to freeze. A heavy silence settled over the space. My father's face burned red, not only from anger but from humiliation as the guests behind him began whispering to one another. My mother fumbled, stammering, "No, no, that can't be. There must be some mistake." But the manager remained composed. We received official cancellation and processed the deposit refund according to the request. The name on the cancellation, Olivia Carter. Emily stood rooted to the spot, her eyes wide, her carefully made-up face beginning to twist under the weight of shame. A few of her colleagues exchanged glances, one even smirked. Another whispered, "So this is the joint celebration she's been bragging about all week." Emily opened her mouth to defend herself, but her throat tightened, no words came. Every light in the restaurant seemed to spotlight her, exposing her awkwardness. My father slammed his hand against the counter, his voice low and seething. "I want to see Olivia right now. Who does she think she is, pulling a stunt like this?" He yanked his phone out and dialed my number, the screen glowing in his furious face. My mother stood at his side, forcing a brittle smile for the guests while hissing under her breath. "Call her, quick, tell her to come explain." Ah! The phone in my bag vibrated nonstop, each buzz like a pounding against my chest. I glanced at the screen. Dad calling. Then Mom calling. And moments later, Emily calling. The calls came one after another, relentless, as if they were trying to break through the fragile wall I had just built and drag me back into my old role. I tightened my grip around my wine glass and drew in a deep breath. The sounds of the restaurant remained warm and alive. Friends sharing stories, laughter rising and falling with the soft background music. I knew that the moment I answered, all of it would dissolve, replaced by anger, scolding, and that familiar sense that somehow I had done something wrong again. I let the phone ring until it stopped. But only a minute later, the screen lit up with a new message from my father. My chest clenched as I read the short, brutal words. "I wish I had never given birth to you." For a moment, it felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. My lungs tightened, my throat locked. It wasn't the first time my father had hurled cruelty at me, but never before had he written it down so blunt, so cold. The letters glared on the small screen like a blade carving deep. I sat frozen for a few seconds. Around me, laughter still rang out. One of my friends had just finished telling a funny story that sent the whole table into applause. The contrast shook me. On one side, love and genuine recognition. On the other, complete rejection from the very person who brought me into this world. My body trembled, my eyes burned. But this time, I refused to let the tears fall. I knew if I cried, I would once again let my parents steal this rare moment from me. I unlocked my phone, stared at the message one last time, then calmly pressed the power button. The screen went black, and the room seemed brighter. I slipped the phone back into my bag and turned toward the table where my friends were waiting. A colleague raised a glass. "Olivia, cheers." I smiled, lifted mine, and the clear chime of glass meeting glass rang out like a declaration that I was exactly where I needed to be. The pain still lingered somewhere deep inside me, like a wound not yet closed. But unlike every time before, I refused to let it steal my moment. I sat upright, smiling as my friends sang their congratulations, and in every laugh, every embrace, I knew I had chosen right. For the first time in my life, I had placed myself above the noise of my family. The next morning, sunlight had barely touched the glass windows of the apartment buildings when pounding erupted at my door, so harsh and urgent it felt like the hinges might break. I knew immediately who it was. No one else would knock with that much anger and authority pressed into each strike. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Standing before me were three all too familiar faces: my father, his face crimson, eyes blazing. My mother just behind him, flustered but masking it with a mocking smile. And Emily, arms crossed, her high heels striking against the hallway floor, her gaze burning with resentment. My father didn't wait for me to invite them in. He stormed straight into the living room, his voice thundering like a storm. "You humiliated this family in front of everyone last night. People are talking, laughing at us. I can't even face my colleagues, And Emily, she lost all her dignity in front of her friends. He jabbed his finger at me, his hand trembling with fury. My mother followed close behind, her tone sharp and cutting. Olivia, you're always selfish, only ever thinking about yourself. You think you're so smart, don't you? So what if the parties were combined? It's not the first time. You blow everything out of proportion. Since you were a child, you've never known how to give in, while all we ever wanted was for the family to be happy together. Emily flicked her hair and let out a mocking laugh. You really are pathetic. Always desperate to be the center of attention, but when have you ever succeeded? If it weren't for me drawing people in, who would have even bothered coming to your party? And now look, you've turned this whole family into a laughingstock. I quietly closed the door behind me, not responding right away. I let their accusations pour down like a hailstorm, each word a stone striking cold and sharp. But unlike every other time, I didn't rush to apologize, didn't try to smother the fire with silence and endurance. I stood still, listening, and in their rage, I realized this was the moment I needed to show them the whole truth. I walked over to the wooden cabinet in the corner of the living room, pulled open the third drawer, and took out a worn brown leather notebook. I set it on the table, gently but with finality. All three of them froze, their eyes locked on the book. I opened it page by page, revealing lines of numbers and crowded notes. I pointed to each entry, my voice steady, unshaking. Here is Emily's tuition for all 4 years of college, every cent paid by me. Here are the utility bills during the months Dad was unemployed, covered by me. Here is the overdue credit card debt of yours, Mom, that I cleared completely so the family wouldn't be blacklisted. Here is the cost of repairing the roof after last year's storm. Here is the time Emily bought a gown for a ball and couldn't afford tuition, and I transferred the money instantly without complaint. And here, I turned another page, is the record of when I put off graduate school so I could keep working and send money home. Each page, each number, was an undeniable piece of evidence. None of them could argue against it. My father, who had been breathing heavily in anger, now stood frozen, his eyes flickering. My mother bit her lip, her hand gripping the strap of her handbag tightly. Emily stared at the numbers, her face burning red, but still forced herself to spit out defiance. So what? Nobody asked you to. You chose to take it all on yourself, that was your decision. I lifted my head and looked straight into the eyes of all three of them, for the first time in my life refusing to turn away. My voice rang out clear, each word heavy but unwavering. Yes, it was my choice. But for all these years, I chose to sacrifice everything for this family. I chose to be the shadow. I chose silence so Emily could shine. I chose to carry the burdens so you could have peace. I never asked for repayment. All I wanted was respect, recognition. But in return, all I received was dismissal, disregard. Last night was the final straw. I will no longer accept being erased. The small room sank into a suffocating silence as I closed the notebook. The ceiling fan above creaked slowly, stretching the tension even further. My father still stood there, his trembling hand resting on the back of a chair, his face flushed red but his mouth unable to form a word. My mother kept her head down, her eyes averted, clutching her handbag strap so tightly her knuckles turned white. And Emily, the one who had always been bold, always commanding the spotlight, now slumped into a chair, her lips pressed together, her eyes flickering with a trace of unease, as if she couldn't quite believe that the sister who had always been her shadow dared to drag everything into the light. I drew in a deep breath and spoke a sentence I hadn't known I had the courage to say. From today, I will no longer be this family's wallet. I have fulfilled my duty, more than fulfilled it. Now I will live for myself. My voice wasn't loud, it wasn't harsh, but it was sharp and final, like a blade slicing a clear boundary. My father lifted his head, anger flashing in his eyes. His mouth opened, ready to unleash the usual torrent of insults, but then his gaze fell upon the thick notebook still lying on the table. The numbers inside stood like unshakable evidence, blocking every accusation. He shut his mouth again, breathing hard, more unsettled than enraged. My mother said nothing either, her lips trembling but silent. The indifference she usually carried was gone, replaced by a choking bewilderment. Emily furrowed her brows, forcing herself into the familiar arrogance. You think you're so noble? Just because you paid a few bills, you think you have the right to look down on this family? But even as the words left her mouth, she seemed to realize how hollow they were. The truth was written across every page of that notebook. It wasn't a few bills, it was my entire youth, my career, the dreams I had set aside. Emily fell silent, her expression shifting from anger to embarrassment, and finally to a stunned emptiness she couldn't disguise. I rose slowly and walked to the apartment door. My hand rested on the knob as I turned back to face them. My voice was calm, but edged with steel. This apartment is my safe space, the one place where I refuse to allow disrespect or control. If you cannot respect me, I must ask you to leave. All three of them stared at me in shock, as though they had just heard a foreign language. For years, I had been the quiet daughter, the one who endured, bowed my head, and carried the weight. And now I was the one telling my own parents and sister to step out of my door. That moment shattered the script our family had lived by for so long. My father tightened his grip on his briefcase and exhaled a long, heavy breath. My mother opened her mouth to speak but then closed it again, her head lowered in silence. Emily sprang up with a stomp of her heels against the wooden floor. You'll regret this, Olivia, she snapped. But her eyes flickered away, no longer carrying the certainty they once did. I opened the door without a word. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy and awkward, until their figures disappeared, leaving behind a quiet emptiness. I closed the door gently, leaned my back against it, and felt the pounding of my heart. For the first time, I had drawn a clear boundary, and they were forced to step outside of it. In that small apartment, I suddenly felt a strange lightness in my chest, though it was laced with a faint tremor. But I knew that from this very moment, a new Olivia had begun, an Olivia who knew how to stand up, how to protect her own space, and who would no longer allow anyone else to define her worth. A week later, Philadelphia bustled on as it always did, but inside me, everything had changed. I no longer woke with the dread of a scolding message waiting on my phone, no longer flinched each time it buzzed. I began to slow down, to savor each moment, and most importantly, I learned how to enjoy my own happiness without needing anyone's permission. That evening, I gathered again with close friends, colleagues, and my advisor at the same little restaurant by the river, the very place that had hosted my real graduation a week earlier. But this time, it wasn't to patch over pain. It was to celebrate a new beginning. The major project our team had just completed had been praised by the company and formally secured a partnership contract. It was the reward for months of grueling work, of sleepless nights bent over glowing computer screens, and we had decided to dedicate the night to celebrating in the most genuine way. On the table were simple dishes, but each carried warmth. Wood-fired pizza fragrant with melted cheese, fresh handmade pasta, crisp green salad. Glasses of wine clinked together, laughter ringing through the small room. I looked around at the familiar faces glowing under the golden lights. No one compared me to Emily. No one diminished my effort. No one turned my moment into a backdrop for someone else. Everything was simply shared joy, mutual recognition, and gratitude. I felt warmth flooding through me, the very feeling I had longed for all my life, yet had never found in my own family. My professor, his eyes shining with pride, raised his glass in a toast. Olivia, you are not only an excellent student but a true leader. You've proven that strength doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room, but from the resolve to see things through. I believe you will go even further. I bowed my head in thanks, my eyes stinging, but this time the tears welled up from happiness. A colleague gently patted my shoulder. Without you, we never could have pulled off that project. You've always been the one quietly carrying everyone, and now it's your turn to be lifted up. His words felt like a mirror, and for the first time, I saw my own reflection clearly, not distorted, not hidden in someone else's shadow. As I let myself sink into the warmth of that moment, my phone buzzed softly in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, a stream of messages from my mother, my father, even Emily. Each one circled the same themes, half excuses, half reproach, with the occasional clumsy attempt at apology. One from my mother read, "No matter what, we're still family. Don't let this go too far." Another from my father was terse. "Come home and talk." Emily's message was more desperate. "You went too far. Making my friends see that I lost everything. But I'm still your sister. We can't cut ties forever." I read them once, my eyes no longer trembling as they once did. Then I slipped the phone back into my bag without responding. I knew they hadn't truly changed, they were only scrambling to pull me back into the same old orbit. But now I had drawn my boundary, and I would not allow anyone to cross it again. As the evening drew to a close, I stepped out onto the veranda of the restaurant and sat by the wide window overlooking the Delaware River. Under the moonlight, the water shimmered like silver, each ripple catching the glow and scattering it into the night. I cradled my glass of wine, letting the cool breeze run through my hair, and whispered to myself, "I have given myself a true family, the people who are grateful and who value me. Not bound by blood, not by a name, but by those who chose to stand beside me, respect me, and truly see me." A sense of peace spread through me, as if I had finally lifted a heavy stone that had been pressing on my chest for years. I realized that what I needed was never to try harder to please someone else, but to raise my head high and dare to live for myself. And I want to end this story not just with a message, but with a flame to send out to everyone who feels lost, belittled, or invisible within their own family. Remember this: no one has the right to steal your moment, because every achievement, every drop of sweat you shed, deserves to be seen and honored. Sacrifice is a choice born of love. It is not an obligation that someone else can impose on you and then take for granted. If you have ever been pushed out of the story of your own life, be brave enough to write a new chapter. If your voice has ever been taken away, learn to speak louder, clearer, even if it trembles. And if you have ever believed that your worth depends on the recognition of others, hold on to this truth: you and only you have the power to define it. Live the life you choose, and create the moments you truly deserve. Your light does not need anyone's permission to shine. The moment you dare to stand up, to set boundaries, to say enough, you will realize you are never small, you are the torch lighting your own path. And perhaps even guiding others who are still struggling in the dark. Never forget this: you are not anyone's shadow, and you do not need anyone's approval to shine as brightly as you already are.